Hello and welcome everyone to the Radix Live AMA. I'm Adam Simmons, Head of Strategy here at Radix, and I'm joined by Piers, our CEO, and Dan, our founder and CTO. So firstly, can I just say we're all so thankful for the extreme amount of enthusiasm and excitement we've seen from our community as we approach the Radix token sale. So really, really glad to have you all here. Also incredibly impressed with the brilliant questions that have been submitted for today's AMA. There's been absolutely loads of them, so we probably won't get through all of them today. But thank you for everyone who submitted them. But before we jump into that, Piers, Dan, how are you both doing today?
I'm doing really well, thanks, Adam. It's been a bit of a sprint towards the launch of the token sale, but I think we're just getting to the end of all of the preparation now, and now it's just a matter of seeing how it goes tomorrow. So very excited about what the next 24, 48 hours is going to bring.
I'm good. I'm excited too for the sale and to see how it does, but also quite excited to finally be at this significant milestone of this project. As many of you know, it's been a very long road for me. Piers is short term in comparison. And yeah, this has definitely aged me quite a lot, as some of you might have seen from the meme that some wonderful person put together. But yeah, it's definitely an exciting time. It's been a lot of hard work gone into this. The team have done a lot of heavy lifting on it. So yeah, congrats to everybody involved on making this a reality. Finally, I hear some people gasp.
So without further ado, I think Adam's got some questions for us.
We sure have. So we're going to be doing this in two sections. Firstly, we're going to be talking about some project-specific ones, which will be going to both of you. Okay. And then towards the end, we'll cover a few questions about the token sale that's starting tomorrow at 6 p.m. UTC. So first off, Piers, let's start with a big scope question. Do you want to replace or extend the current crypto ecosystem?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, I think that the only real answer here is extend. Like the crypto ecosystem is all one big experiment, and lots of parts of it are good and work really well for what they're designed for, and lots of it needs to be improved. But fundamentally, this is a revolution of finance. It's a revolution of money. It's a revolution of assets. It's not a competition really between each other, more than a collaboration project on working out how we can rethink how the global financial infrastructure is built. Like, I love Ethereum. Ethereum is what got me into crypto in the first place. And like Dan will wax lyrical about Bitcoin, and all of the new projects that are being launched and the new ideas that are coming out, I think are also just this great part of this wider conversation about how should we and what should we build using this technology. In much the same way as the start of the internet, there was this wonderful huge coming together of people and ideas and ideologies to create what we see as the modern internet today. And it took a long time. Like, the internet has been around for 40 years or so, maybe even longer. Dan can correct me on that one. And during that time, it has just been everyone building on top of each other's innovations, on top of each other's ideas. And Radix only exists as a result of that. It doesn't exist in a vacuum. It exists as a result of learning from what came before with some of the great academics, the people who were responsible for coming up with the first consensus systems, and then further, like what's happened with Bitcoin and what was made possible with trustless ledgers that could solve the Byzantine generals problem. All of that is all just one big long conversation about how we can build these anti-fragile systems upon which money can be built. And I think that desire to extend and expand and improve the existing crypto ecosystem can be shown with projects like Stakehound, which we incubated to be a way of unlocking a load of the liquidity that is currently locked in staking on all of these different ledgers, not by taking away the security of all of these different ledgers, but by enabling people to access decentralized finance applications on the Radix ecosystem, but also on the Ethereum ecosystem and other ecosystems that as an aggregate improves the amount of assets that are available, improves the total liquidity of the ecosystem, and improves the number of ways in which we can start thinking about using these underlying assets of value to create new financial products and new financial instruments and new innovations. So yeah, I definitely see this as a way of expanding and improving the crypto ecosystem, not as a way of competing.
Brilliant answer there, Piers. I think the next good question, which we should jump into, because Dan foreshadowed this slightly when he said that it's been a long time coming where we're getting to here, is, Dan, what are your passions and motivations to keep track with Radix over the 7 years?
Yeah, so I think the original inspiration was purely technical, I think. More so than economical. So the original inspiration was someone solved the Byzantine generals problem in a trustless manner. Wow, I mean, this is like an age-old issue, and all consensus mechanisms and distributed systems that needed agreement before then, they were all permissioned, centralized, right? And so that's kind of where I started with it, but then very quickly realized that this is more than just a technical solution to a problem. This is actually as fundamental, if not more so, than the internet itself, right? You can, networks of value on top of networks of information is a massive thing, and being able to take out the friction of the, getting a bank account and all the unbanked people. People in places where the economic policy is failing and there's recessions or depressions, etc. Once that kind of impact, that realization of the impact that it could have, it's quite profound. And so that coupled with the initial findings in my investigation of, okay, how did this guy, Satoshi Nakamoto, even solve this problem? And the solution that he put into play, was like, okay, this is an early version of what will actually unshackle all of these limitations and frictions that mean that people are unbanked and mean that people have to suffer economic depressions in countries for whatever reason, right? Natural reasons, corruption, etc., etc. And going back to what Piers said about the internet, like the internet as we see it today is very different to the internet that was first around when it wasn't even really an internet. There was multiple iterations of these connected networks from DARPANET all the way to what we have today, and they all use different protocols, but the fundamental ideology of them was the same: connect computers so that they can talk and information and communications can flow better. And distributed ledgers are that, but for value. Right? Value can flow better, less friction, more easily, more efficiently. And so over time, I'm sure we'll go through these iterations of technology that just in the same way that the internet did. And what keeps me going is just the promise of what this can deliver. And I think that we're in a period of time now where that'll either accelerate up to fruition or it won't happen at all. So I think that everybody needs to be pushing so that it goes the right way, because this is a once in a lifetime opportunity here to use this technology to actually do some good and to actually change the way that things work to some degree. And I don't mean like a complete overhaul of everything, because I don't think that'll ever happen, but absolutely can improve lives, business, economics, countries even. So just, yeah, that kind of just the potential just really keeps me going. It's so exciting.
And that excitement is obviously something that is shared by many other people and projects in this space, and seeing this continual evolution is very exciting, as you say, Dan. And I guess what a lot of people tuning in today are going to want to know, Piers, is that how is Radix different from these other projects that are trying to tackle many of these same problems and different parts of them?
Yeah, that's an answer with sort of varying degrees of very long explanations. I suppose at the highest level, a public ledger requires three things. It has to be scalable, it has to be secure, and for it to be successful, for it to truly actually break into the mainstream and be something that becomes adopted by large numbers of people, it has to be easy to use. And the basis of Radix, like the 6-7 years of research that has gone into building Radix, started with the first. Like, how do you fundamentally scale a public ledger? And to answer that question, you first have to go, well, what is it that you have to do? Like, what is the metric by which you're measuring scale? And there's sort of two categories to this. One is, how many people can I serve? Can this possibly allow every single person in the world to use it simultaneously? And the second category is the slightly more complicated one, and the one where things become sort of shades of gray as to whether or not is this scalability, is what kind of things are you scaling? Are you just scaling transactions? Because just transactions, just things like being able to do 1 million transactions per second in a side channel is interesting, but it's not what really makes these platforms actually interesting. It's the ability to take applications where you can create complete decentralized autonomous contracts that can deal with value, that are able to talk with each other. They're able fundamentally to interoperate. And so what I think there's been 3 phases of scaling, right? The first phase of scaling was when Bitcoin was created, and people went, we're getting full blocks, every block. And so what we need is a way of doing more transactions per block. And this created like a lot of debate and controversy in Bitcoin, and ended up with things like Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin Satoshi Vision. And like, you can argue the tosses to other things that happened in there, and then the all of the stuff around segregated witness. But fundamentally, it was, we've got a transaction scalability problem, we need to solve it. And then Ethereum came along and said, hey, this isn't just about transactions. What if you could also program things on top of this? That started with tokens, like non-fungible tokens and ERC20 tokens. And so then you got all of these people creating all of these new token types. And that was the 2017 sort of bubble. But you also saw the first evidences of what type of scalability was needed for the next generation. So Ethereum was more scalable than Bitcoin, not a huge amount, but more scalable than Bitcoin, but now had this congestion problem associated with user to application scalability. I have CryptoKitties existing on a ledger, and I really want to go and hatch some CryptoKitties, but I can't do it because there's 100,000 concurrent users all trying to do the same thing, which for a game, 100,000 concurrent users is nothing. Right? Like, it is tiny beer, but for Ethereum, fundamentally made it fall over, fundamentally stopped it working. And so the next paradigm of scalability that people started thinking about was user to application scalability. How do I get transactions? How do I make sure that a application doesn't get bottlenecked by other applications where users are trying to access those applications? And so that problem actually ended up birthing things like Polkadot and things like Cosmos and things like Avalanche and Near, and like, they were all an answer to the question, how do I scale applications in the individual sense, a user to an application problem? The thing is then DeFi came along, and DeFi is an application to application scalability problem. It isn't just I as a user want to be able to access Uniswap, but also Compound wants to be able to access Uniswap, and Aave wants to be able to access Uniswap, and 1inch wants to be able to access Uniswap. So now you've got this application to application scalability problem that, again, these new protocols that have been built don't fundamentally solve that. They don't solve for this really important thing in DeFi called atomic composability. Now, Radix has taken, like, from its roots, always took a very fundamental approach to how to build its technology from the ground up. And so the answer to how do you scale has always been the threefold answer. Like on Radix, how do you scale applications in all of the guises you would imagine, user to application and application to application, in addition to just being able to scale transactions. And I think that's one of the things that really differentiates Radix beyond everything else is our fundamental approach to making sure that the consensus algorithm and the execution environment all are designed around the idea of this is a platform where everything needs to interoperate, because that is the genius of it. That's what makes it powerful. That's what drives DeFi forwards. And if you haven't designed around this idea of application to application scalability, user to application scalability, and user to user scalability, then you're not solving the entire problem. You're not doing the threefold. You're not solving the threefold question. So from Radix, that was the starting point, scalability as the basis for our technology differentiation. The second part of this is ease of use, which really comes down to the development environment that we've created, or we've designed, called the Radix Engine V2. So the Radix Engine V1 is already up and running, and we've then taken the Radix Engine V1 and looked at how people are building decentralized finance specifically, and designed a way of making it really easy to build these kind of applications. And the way that we did this is something called components, and components are little finite state machines, which are really, really secure computer programs that do a specific function. And you can think of these as like little Lego building blocks. And on Ledger, there's all of these Lego building blocks that you can assemble together. You can create your new Lego building blocks, but you can assemble them together to create the applications you want to, which is, from the point of view of a developer, far easier and more secure than going ahead and trying to build something from scratch in Solidity code and having to deploy the entire stack in a VM every single time you want to deploy something as simple as an ERC20 token. On Ethereum, for example, there is no concept of a token. You don't just create an ERC20 token, you create the entire definition of a token in the program that you deploy. On Radix, none of that is true. All you have to do is call against the Radix ledger these components that already exist, or if it doesn't already exist, you can build them. And you then have this toolbox that you can build very quickly applications on top of using the Radix Engine V2. And then that comes into this concept of security, which is fundamentally, you need, beyond everything else, you need these public ledgers to be secure, not just from a consensus point of view, but from an application execution point of view. Because as we've seen many times, an error in code, an error in logic can cause millions and millions of dollars to either be stolen, or at the very least to be rendered useless on the platform. And like, you know, the DAO hack was one of the biggest and most famous of these. $130 million was stolen, and it created Ethereum 2.0. But Solidity hasn't really moved on since those days. We just got better at doing things like security audits. But what Radix has taken is, again, a new approach and said, look, like, let's think about how we should be building fundamentally secure financial applications, and let's build a protocol around this idea of fundamentally secure components, rather than using things that are sort of difficult to secure languages like Solidity, and forcing developers to be responsible for the entire security of everything that they put up, regardless of how many often used components that might have within the application that is being deployed. So for Radix, those three things: scalability, ease of use, and security. And we wanted to make sure that we were going to be able to deliver all three of them, so that we could have a true next generation public ledger that would work for this incredible decentralized finance revolution that is currently going on.
Fantastic. Now, Piers, the question is then, for anyone who wants to explain Radix to a friend, family, colleague, or similar, what would be your quick soundbite you'd want them to remember Radix by?
I was asked this a while ago by one of our team members. So for someone who doesn't know crypto, like just never really heard of it, only knows Bitcoin, Radix is a platform that makes it easy for developers to build programs that deal with assets and money in a secure and anti-fragile way. For people who understand crypto, I normally just say it's similar to Ethereum, but much easier to build on, much more secure, and much more scalable. And then for people who really understand crypto, I do a bit more of my spiel that I just talked about previously. I hope that helps.
I've just thought of a really good tagline for developers, actually. We spent years building so you don't have to.
That is good, Dan. That is good. Would you like a job in my marketing department?
Occasionally, I do have these little sparks of inspirational genius, I guess.
You're not that busy at the moment, right? You can come and work for marketing. That's fine, right?
Sure. No, I don't want to do marketing for Sam. Come on.
Oh, darn. Well, that's fine though, because this next question I think we need your big technical brain on, and it's a question which I think is worded beautifully. That everyone knows you've got a great deal of respect for developers in the crypto space, and having acknowledged that though, please could you briefly explain what Radix is offering that the competition isn't? And they specifically asked, is there anything that separates Radix from kind of other DeFi chains like Ava?
Okay. So, I mean, I'm not really gonna talk specific projects because I really don't have enough time to be an expert on all of the different protocols and projects out there. Probably as far as my level of expertise on different protocols goes is maybe Bitcoin, some Ethereum. Everything else is fairly medium to high level. I mean, I try to keep up, but it's just not possible to do. But I think broad strokes. I mean, really, what we're trying to build here is a general platform. So it doesn't matter, as Piers was saying, right? If you're doing application to application or value transactions, or you're touching lots of things, that's really what it is that we're trying to do. And I don't think, or I don't know of at least, any other projects that are looking at it from that purely general point of view of this needs to be able to handle all of these different use cases, all these different applications, needs to be able to do it at large amounts of scale, needs to be able to do it efficiently, needs to be easy to use from an application developer point of view. And that kind of generality of what we're trying to make the protocol handle is part of what's taken us 7 years to do. The mandate of we need these things, we need scale, we need ease of use, we need efficiency, we need security, etc. They haven't really changed, but because it's such a broad scope, and because we didn't want to, I guess, I don't want to say shortcut because that would be unfair, but kind of silo different applications away in different places, just so that we can get something functional to market. That was never really the long-term idea. I mean, if you think about you're using the internet and you can't make an online payment because somebody over on Facebook is uploading 2,000 pictures from their phone. It's that kind of those kind of issues that we see in some of these other blockchain protocols and distributed ledger protocols. Like CryptoKitties is always the example that people go towards. This application is so popular that other applications don't get a look. And I think the only way to really fundamentally solve those problems is if you have a general protocol that doesn't really care what it's moving around. It's just moving stuff around. It doesn't care if it's an application, doesn't care if it's a transaction, doesn't care if it's a message, some tweet like status, a blog post. It doesn't really care what it's moving. It just moves it. And you can move it with or without value, with or without DeFi actions attached to it. And I think the main thing, if I had to pick one right now, where I think we have the edge over other projects, is the ability to be able to do these very complex but atomic transactions, right? So like, if you imagine I want to use the internet, and I want to make an online payment for a rental car, and I want to buy an aircraft ticket, and I want to book my hotel. If I was doing that as a person, I'd have to do it kind of serially. Right? I couldn't do it all at the same time. I couldn't book my car and book my hotel stay and book my aircraft ticket at the same time if I was doing that as me on the internet, right? Because I can only do one thing at a time. And so I couldn't then make those things conditional because I'm not able to execute them all at the same time because I'm just one person with one hand and I can't do all of this stuff. I can't multitask. So if I wanted to bail out of those transactions, if my airline wasn't able to get me to the place I'm going to, then I'm a bit stuck, because then it becomes a question of, well, which one do I book first? Do I book the plane ticket first, but then hope that there's space at the hotel, or do I book the hotel first and hope there's a plane ticket and there's a car available for me? And that's fundamentally what we're able to solve with the technology that we've developed. You can touch all of those things at the same time, and if any of them fail, you can abort out the entire transaction. So I either get my car, my airline ticket, and my hotel, or I get none of them. And it's able to do that without any additional complexity if any of it fails, right? So in the case of me doing this manually online, if I booked my plane ticket and then booked my hotel, but there's no cars were available, I then have to manually contact the hotel and cancel my reservation and contact the airline and try and cancel my ticket. Whereas with this, if you were able to do that atomically, you wouldn't have that complexity afterwards. And so that level of complexity post attempting to do that operation is what is present in all of the protocols right now. You have to do them serially. You can't do them all in one go. You have to do them serially. And so if any of them fail, you've got then some additional work to do to unravel, to cancel what it was that you wanted to do. So apart from the scale and the composability and the buildability and all those other things, I think that is our main USP right now. Because scalability is great. The ability to do 10,000, 100,000, a million transactions a second is great, but nobody needs that right now. That's a forward-looking thing far into the future. What people need right now is that kind of stuff. Easy to build on, easy to use. Atomic composability of transactions is an absolute must with DeFi, really. The scalability is just kind of the long-term guarantee that this network can grow to practically whatever size it needs to be to support a growing network of value and a very large economy of scale.
Yeah, I think I'll just add a little clarification there, which is that we're talking about atomic composability across shards, right? Because on a blockchain where you have a single set of operations happening that isn't cut up, like that's happening. That's why DeFi is able to happen on Ethereum 1 at the moment. It's just as soon as you go to Ethereum 2.0 or any sharded ledger like Polkadot, Avalanche, Cosmos, Near, all of these sharded protocols, fundamentally, yes, they make the applications more scalable, but they break this ability for you to be able to compose them together. So right now, yes, you can go, right, I would like the train ticket and the plane ticket and the hotel and the car rental all together, because it's all being executed essentially by one computer, which is the Ethereum blockchain, block by block progression. But as soon as you go, right, we've got to cut these up and so that we can make it more scalable, you break all of that magic from happening, which is one of the things that's really pushing DeFi forwards at the moment.
Yeah, if anybody wants to get kind of gauge how important this is, when Ethereum 2.0, well, one of the many blog posts and updates around that technology, but there was one specifically a couple of months ago where it spoke about how would you do multiple DeFi actions on Ethereum 2.0, and there was quite a lot of chatter from the developer community around this inability to do it atomically. And if you want to go and look at that and see how important that is to developers, because it just makes the life a lot easier to do atomic actions cross shard, and it either goes through or it doesn't. you don't have to worry about unrolling it afterwards, then you'll be able to get a fairly good idea of how important this is to developers and to DeFi as a whole, just by kind of digging around on some of the discussions on the Ethereum forums and on Reddit and everywhere. It's a major headache for developers, because your developer has to deal with it essentially.
And that actually leads us on really, really nicely with developers building on Radix and how we're going to be catering to them, with a question to Piers actually, which is, what are your plans in really making the Radix network appealing to developers, especially with the launch of things like Ethereum 2.0, because building this ecosystem is obviously an important part to a successful network.
Yeah, I think that a lot of the times what public ledger projects have focused on outside of Ethereum did this very well, and either by accident or design, ended up in a scenario where a lot of individual developers started at the start, and it was relatively low stakes. Like Ethereum's token sale was, I think, $18 million or something like that. And they built this community of developers, like early adopters, who really liked the idea of what was happening. And so a lot of people came along and just played around with the tools and the code, and these standards emerged, like the ERC20 standards, and also all of these tools that made it easy to get started as a developer in the Ethereum ecosystem. And then people started playing around and doing simple things that became open source code libraries that other people could build on top of. And that, like, you can trace all of that history back, like from Open Zeppelin today. What that was is built on many, many iterations of developers just playing around with the ecosystem. And what a lot of new projects have done is that they've gone, right, what we want is we want some really big projects on our ledger. So let's go and we're going to build a massive war chest, and we're going to go and pay people to come and build on top of our ledger. That would be a great way of getting people to build things. And they didn't really pay attention to what drives an ecosystem in the first place, or what drives people to want to build an ecosystem in the first place, and the sort of the fundamental motivations of why you would choose, EOS versus Ethereum or whatever. There's the wonderful term called missionaries versus mercenaries, which is like, if you convince people to come and join you in your mission, then you have something stronger than just paying someone to do something for you. In Radix, what we've really tried to do is recognize that the power of the individual developer, but not in a way where we're going, right, if you come and build on Radix, we'll pay you, and we will determine what's good and what's not, and whether or not what you're doing is worthwhile, and you can apply to us for grants and all this kind of stuff. Instead, the things I was talking about before, these components are can be built and added to the on-ledger component library by any developer. And if a component is used by an application, then every time that application is used by an end user, part of the payment for the use of that application goes to the developer as a developer royalty for the use of that component within that application. And this is about recognizing that before $1 billion application can exist, there's all of these little bits and pieces that just have to exist, that people have to have come and thought, oh, it'd be really good if there was this one bit of code that did this one specific thing. It'd be really good if I really need this tool. And each one of those individually can feel like a relatively negligible thing. You can be like, oh, someone could bang that out in an afternoon. But if you multiply those afternoons together across a large community of people, it becomes a completely and utterly unconquerable number of man hours. And so Radix we decided that the way in which you could make sure that not only projects would want to come and build on top of a platform, but developers would want to come and contribute to the ecosystem is by giving them a direct stake in the success of applications that build on top of the Radix platform. And so this is how the developer royalties and the component libraries work, in that not only is it more secure and more easy to build on top of, but also if you contribute towards the ecosystem. If you spend half an afternoon putting together a couple of components you think might be useful to a decentralized finance project, regardless of whether or not that's something simple like an Oracle feed or something much more complicated like a continuous function market maker function, like those are the things that collectively make the platform attractive to build on. Because if the more you can lower the opportunity cost, and the difficulty in actually getting to the point where you can deploy something, the more people that you're going to attract to your platform. And you can see the same thing in the internet. Like in the early days of the internet, it was really, really difficult to build a website, and so there weren't that many websites. And just collectively, those tools got better and better, and eventually, you ended up having this explosion, this Cambrian explosion in sort of in the sort of the Web 2.0 era, where all of these tools and new ways in which you could build things suddenly built a community around building on top of the internet. That meant that, of course, you wanted to be on the internet and not in an intranet because the opportunity was so much larger. With Radix, because this is a public ledger of value, where value flows as an intrinsic part of the protocol, you can give people direct stake in the success of the code that they build for the platform. And that's not just big projects who go out and raise millions and millions of dollars and build the next, sort of decentralized stablecoin. It's also the individual who gets involved in a community early, and it is actually instrumental in making it easy for each of the next wins. Because all of this platform building, all of this ecosystem building is a collection of small wins that build up to a huge ecosystem, not a single large leap, but a long-term project of nurturing and providing self-enforcing incentives. Because ultimately that's where blockchain started out, as self-enforcing incentives. What we've done is it's self-enforcing incentives for ecosystem development as well as self-enforcing incentives for security.
So from that regard, is it quite similar to the sporting principle of marginal gains giving you long-term success, and the difference between a podium finish in the Olympics and not is 101% improvements in a system is better than 100%?
Says the man who was on the Olympic team for kayaking. Yes, it is exactly the same principle, in that lots of small wins collectively make up a much larger win than one big win with nothing else surrounding it. And this project is bigger than us. It's bigger than Dan. It's bigger than the team. It is designed to be a public infrastructure, and that public infrastructure should, as part of it, be nurturing and rewarding to the people who contribute to it. And that's sort of the fun part of the fundamental principle and how we've built this.
It's a really exciting time, and I've seen a lot of personal friends who are developers get very excited about this principle, as well as people in the community. So it's going to be really interesting to see how people get involved with this. And of course, one of the things that always comes up, Dan, is of course Scripto and how that differs from other coding languages. And I've seen it come up in your bi-weekly AMAs on Telegram on the technical side. So it's probably worth jumping into that, because we had quite a few questions about how Scripto differs from other coding languages, where it's at the moment, and what the plans are for the future.
Okay, yeah. So Scripto it's kind of a long-running backstory in the TV show, right? Every now and then there's an episode where Scripto is kind of the star of the show a little bit, but then it always goes back to being the background plot that's running behind it. And there's a few reasons for that, right? So Scripto as an actual language, we've spent quite a lot of time internally thinking about what are the pitfalls of using fully true incomplete languages. How would you resolve some of those issues? How could you have formal verification in that language so that you could reduce the number of mistakes that a developer might make, or reduce the complexity and all that kind of risk? And so Scripto is intended to be what's called a domain-specific language, where it's a language that's tuned for a particular set of tasks. And so it's you couldn't write, Call of Duty in a language like that, but a language like that would be very well tuned towards a particular domain. I guess similar to some degree, where Python is very good at simulating scientific models, right, which is essentially what it was, what the inspiration was behind it. I mean, it's used for everything these days, but that was the inspiration behind. So it's not truly a domain-specific language, but it is geared very much towards that kind of scientific modeling, analysis, etc. And so when you look at what networks of value, what kind of operations will be common and what kind of things will it need to do, you can narrow it down from being fully Turing complete to being domain specific and not really lose any flexibility or functionality, right? You can't build Pac-Man in it, but who wants to build Pac-Man on Ethereum, for example, right? You wouldn't build Pac-Man. Well, you might want to just because you're being awkward, but you could build your value side of that application in a domain specific language, and then all your external stuff like the game logic and the rendering and the graphics, that could be somewhere else, right? That could be JavaScript in the website somewhere. And so that was kind of our high level view of what Scripto would eventually become, with the caveat that, depending on where the landscape moves, we want to leave the possibility to move to potentially fully Turing complete with some form of correctness or something like that. But every single time we got into that process of looking at Scripto and thinking about what did we want it to do, what were the operations that we wanted to do, how would we need to incorporate that into the architecture, something fell out that was always much more critical path. So one of the things that fell out of some Scripto discussions was this concept of a constraint machine. And then another thing that fell out of those discussions was, well, finite state machines. Let's look at using them. And then another thing that fell out was programmable finite state machines, so that users and developers can make their own, and it's got all this formal correctness, and it's all got all these features of this domain specific language within it. And then so on and so on and so forth. And you've got the Radix engine, the Radix engine 2, the components, etc., etc. So even though Scripto is still very much in the background, it's kind of in the foreground as well. It's a bit weird. But in order to do and to actually deliver something that would satisfy the original specification that we had for Scripto, all of these little bits and pieces that end up being on the more critical path, we need them in place anyway. We need to have constraints. We need to have state machines. We need to have the Radix engine. We need to have components, because without those things, we can't build Scripto. So instead of Scripto being a kind of a big release, like here's Scripto. Before this day, there was no Scripto, and now here's Scripto. It's more of a, well, here's a piece of Scripto, and here's another piece of Scripto, and so on and so forth. And then eventually, over the roadmap, at some point in the future, we'll end up with Scripto and Scripto Plus and all the other things. But when you break down right now, what do you need for DeFi? What do you need for value transfers? There really isn't a great deal of functionality. It's mirrored everywhere. The kind of actions that you need to do and record on the ledger and the interactions are all quite similar. So if you can accommodate most of those actions with just a few distinct components, which is obviously where we're getting first. And if those components are low level enough, then even if you don't have a specific function that does the specific thing that you need, you can probably put some of them together to get the function that you need to do. Which in the same way, where if I had a CPU that didn't have a multiplication instruction in its instruction set, well, if I want to do 3 times 15, I can also do, well, 5 add 5 add 5. I can iterate the addition, and I get a simulated multiplication. So there's that concept as well, where just because it's not there doesn't mean that if you don't, if you spend some brain cycles, you can maybe put those bricks together in a way that you can actually get the functionality that you want. So I mean, don't expect super Scripto Turing completeness to suddenly appear on the roadmap somewhere. It's more of a long-term progression towards that ultimate specification that we defined quite some time ago.
So I think this one is probably a question that's good for both of you to dive in on, which is we've spoken a lot about the benefits of Radix, how Radix is aiming to be the future of DeFi and beyond. But one of the big questions is that many projects have had kind of big aspirations, and what is Radix doing to avoid some of the pitfalls that other projects have come across in when they've been trying to make a fast, scalable network, but have had to make some adjustments that maybe weren't in their original vision?
I mean, I think that the first thing is staged releases. We haven't said RPN1, Radix Public Network version 1 is going to be able to do millions of transactions per second. Like the Radix Public Network version 1 will do 30 transactions per second, and that will be a test bed for us to go to Radix Network Public Network version 2 and then Radix Public Network version 3, where each one of these adds the components that make it possible to be able to do more and more transactions per second, more and more scalability. Because as Dan says, like everything in security that is well designed and well built is about progression of functionality, progression of scope. So one of the things that we've been really clear about, and that we make clear on our roadmaps and we make clear on our communications, is how we are going to be releasing this. And like the thing is that no network needs to be able to do that kind of scale day one, because it took a couple of years for Ethereum to need to get to that level in the first place. But fundamentally, what you do need is security. You do need your consensus to be secure. You do need your proof of stake to work properly. You do need to make sure that you can't have simple errors in your system, and that people can attack it and make sure that it's robust. And the same thing goes for the scripting engines. The same thing goes for the finite state machines, the components, and all that kind of stuff. Because going from 0 to 100 is a really great way of making problems that is very difficult to come back from. So Radix's roadmap is all about steady progression of functionality.
Yeah, I think like complexity of these systems, that's like a real risk for pretty much all projects now. So like Bitcoin blockchain, it's so elegantly simple. I mean, you can code a blockchain in a weekend. I mean, you're not going to test it for edge cases and stuff, but you could code the fundamentals of a proof of work blockchain in a weekend if you dosed up on Red Bull and pizza. You wouldn't want to launch it, of course, but you get the fundamentals in there because it really is simple. But with that simplicity comes some of these issues, right? As in, it can't scale, it's limited in what it can do, and those kind of things that you need to solve they just add complexity. Whether it be in your security model, whether it be in your application model, whether it be in your network topology, the way that nodes are talking to each other, your consensus mechanism, trying to improve on that simplicity of Bitcoin just adds complexity. And the further you're trying to push the envelope in terms of what your ledger is able to do, the more complexity you're adding, the more risk you're adding, the more technical debt maybe you're adding. And so any one of those things can trip you up, and you may not even see it coming. Everybody who's working on this is still human. Most of the stuff that people are doing is new tech. It's not mature. The only thing really in this space that is mature is Bitcoin and Ethereum. Everything else is only a couple of years old, really, 2 to 3 years old. Stuff that's older than that has died off because it didn't bring anything significant to the table. Like, if anybody even remembers this, you need to let me know. Tenebricks, right? That was one of the very first clones of Bitcoin back in 2012, I think it was. But it didn't really do anything different, so it died off. So the only things you've got that are mature technologies is is Bitcoin and Ethereum. Everything else is new. Everything else is really untested, experimental. So slowing down your roadmap, what you're releasing feature wise, but doing it sensibly so that you're bringing things in as they're needed is a realization that we had. And for us as well, there's risk for us too, just because, you know, we have Cerberus and it's been reviewed by very smart people, the Expo guys, UC Davies. It's under peer review. A lot of people have looked at it. A lot of people have pulled it apart. Theoretically, it works, but that doesn't negate the risk of the implementation, right? The guys coding this thing are humans. The guys coding this thing can have a late night and do something wrong, or they can be having a day where they're not feeling very well and make a mistake. And so rolling it out in stages isn't purely because, well, they don't trust the theory. Even if we trusted the theory, we've got to get some trust in the implementation as well. So this slow and steady wins the race kind of it. Well, I you know, we're kind of experts at that already, right? 7 years in, so we're just going to keep doing what we're doing and slow and steady win the race. Hopefully.
That was a brilliant answer, and I'm sure that alongside myself, a couple of people tuning in will be feeling very inadequate if slow and steady wins the race and putting up a blockchain in a weekend is the same sentence, Dan. It just goes to show.
Well, I mean, you couldn't build a blockchain from scratch.
I love the way he's still saying you. I could build a no. Dan could build a blockchain.
Come on, there's to totally let the magic out of the bag, right? You wouldn't build one in a weekend and then release it as a production network, right? Because you still got a shitload of testing and things to do, and you wouldn't just want to go and do that. But sure. I'm saying is you could build one and it would function as long as you didn't poke it too hard with any kind of stick to make it fall over, because the principles are very simple. The principles behind a blockchain are very simple. It took a long time for somebody to actually figure them out, right? But that's the thing with information and knowledge and ideas. It takes a long time for somebody to figure it out, and then when they figure it out, it's like, oh yeah, obvious, of course that's the solution. Okay, but if it was easy to figure out, everybody would have come up with the solution 100 times over. So.
I love that analogy, Dan. It's brilliant. So I'm just conscious of time. We had an hour of this AMA, so I think we're going to move on to some questions we've had around tomorrow's launch of the token sale for Radix. A lot of people are very excited about that, and there's been a few kind of trends in questions coming through. But before we dive into that, just want to say, for technical questions, Dan does a AMA bi-weekly on Telegram on a Tuesday afternoon. So if you do have questions, want to dive in a bit more deeply there, feel free to come and jump into those, because it's a really great medium, and Dan loves doing it. So diving into the
as well, I do try and jump into Telegram throughout the week and answer a few here and there as well. It's a bit difficult at the moment with everything going on, but it is nice sometimes to just distract myself into Telegram with some questions. So long as you put the AMA there, if I do get some time to jump in before these scheduled slots and answer them, then I do try and do that as well. If I don't, then they'll get picked up from the AMA.
And now it's on film, Dan, that you've said that. So
I said try. I didn't promise.
It's good. So on the sales side, I think, Piers, these will mainly be in your ball court. Sure. So jumping straight in is a question we've seen a lot from the community is that people have been following Radix since the very early days, even back in the Immuni days, and are interested to know in what was the relationship between kind of the Radix community who got involved earlier and the token sale that's starting tomorrow.
Yeah, it's a really great question. So back in the e-money days, I know that it's spelled e-muni, but it's pronounced e-money. I have it on good authority from Dan anyway. The community was pretty informal. It sort of started off existing on Bitcoin Talk and grew from there. And between the years 2014 to 2017, Dan took contributions from the community that helped to build what we're building now. those community contributions have a percentage of tokens that are being issued to them for the sort of the support and everything that happened over that period. That is going to be 3 billion Radix tokens. That is issued as part of the essentially issued as part of the ERC20 issuance. This token sale is a continuation of building that community. Obviously, we've come a long way since then. We've now got a bunch of different ways in which entities that have responsibilities, right? So we have the Radix Foundation, which is the not-for-profit entity that is responsible for the guardianship of the objectives of the public ledger. And that entity we want to be a non-profit because we believe that this is essentially we're launching a public good here. We want there to be a public ledger that anyone can come and use and that is open source and is able to be a resource for anyone in the world. So we wanted to create a foundation that could fundamentally be that guardian custodian. That entity, the foundation, it has also got some tokens that it is that is essentially that it will end up owning. Some of those tokens are being sold by what we call the token generating entity, which is the entity that's actually responsible for issuing the tokens because of a number of legal things. We've decided to make sure that the entity that's issuing the tokens and the entity that's responsible ultimately for the custodianship of the public ledger are separate, but the token sale that is happening now is selling some of these tokens to form part of the permanent endowment of the foundation, so that it can do the things that we want it to continue to exist as a custodian, as a guardian of the public ledger, well beyond me and Dan are no longer part of the project, and is able to keep to that by not being a shareholder held entity, but be an entity for public good.
And then on the sale that's starting tomorrow, Piers, and another one of the big questions, which is a very humbling question to have to ask, is that due to the amount of interest, there's been people following the project for many years now. The sale tomorrow is on a first come, first serve basis. Is there a reason why we went for that approach versus people who signed up earlier, or some kind of queuing system?
Yeah, so we went through a lot of different scenarios of how we could run the sale. What we've tried to do is basically just give everyone the same opportunity, the same timeline to be able to contribute. Everything, every way in which you could possibly formulate it is going to end up with people being unhappy. Like, what if you only opened it up to people from sort of like 2 years ago and it was completely sold out, and then no one who wanted to get in now was able to contribute. Like, there's always going to be someone unhappy with the way that you do these things, especially if the token sale ends up being sold out very quickly. So we decided that ultimately first come, first serve was the fairish-est way we could do it. That's not to say it's without its flaws, but it just seemed to be that, if you're following the project and you've been active in the community, you should know when it's all going to kick off, and everyone has a fair chance at participating.
And on the participation, obviously the sale tomorrow is a minimum purchase of $5,000 worth of USDC or Ethereum. Quite a lot of people have been asking why we selected that minimum price. Was it something that we could set lower? Again, from people who want to be able to come in and support Radix as we're building the future of DeFi.
Yeah, so every time a token is sold, to make sure that you're complying with anti-money laundering regulations and know your customer regulations, you have to do a certain amount of checks, and to do that is actually quite onerous, in terms of the time it can take, and what you have to check for to make sure that you're complying with regulation. And we wanted to make sure that we were doing this, above the board, as much as possible, because fundamentally we believe that's the best way of ensuring the longevity of the project is by making sure that you are doing things by the book. And we aren't in early crypto land anymore. We're in 2020, and there is a book. There is a way that people expect you to participate, expect you to conduct your public sale. And so that's why we decided to have this minimum cap, not because we don't want everyone in the community to have an opportunity, but we basically had to weigh the time it takes to sort of process these contributions against a desire to make sure that this actually starts to be in market, and opening it up to an even wider audience so that other people can also own the ERC20 token as well. So fundamentally, we had to take a view, and that was the lowest we could go.
Thank you for giving a good answer on that, Piers. I know a lot of people have been asking. I'm very conscious of the time as well, that we're actually over schedule. So where's the best place people can go to find out more information? One, about the token sale that starts tomorrow, but also just about Radix more in general.
Sure. So the token sale page is at tokens, tokens, how to spell tokens, tokens.radixdlt.com. The information on the token sale page is issued by the Radix Foundation, acting as the pre-incorporation entity for the token generating entity. That pre-incorporation agent for the token generating entity. All of that information there tells you about the economics and where you can find out more about how the token works and how we plan to sort of build the system for DeFi specifically. And on at 6 p.m. UTC, the Radix token sale will formally open, and you'll be able to access the Radix token sale portal, which you will be able to find at radixtokens.com, which is already linked from the tokens.radixdlt.com, but you won't be able to register until it opens tomorrow at 6 p.m.
Fantastic. So as we're wrapping up now, Dan, is there any final word you'd like to say to everyone tuning in tonight?
Just I guess thanks to everyone for the support of what we're trying to do. Whether you've been around since day one, or you're just joining and getting excited about what it is that we're trying to do, your support helps us to get through the daily grind. It's been a long journey for me and for the people on the team now as well. So some of the guys on the team, like Piers, has been in this now for 3 years plus, and years in crypto are long. It's a year in crypto feels like 5 years anywhere else. So it can be very exhausting. It can be very draining. So having the support from a community, whether it's a small community or a big community, it all helps when things maybe don't go as planned, or a delay has to happen, or you have to scrap something and start again. Without the support of the community, it can be quite emotionally draining sometimes. And so your community helps to lift you back up and be like, let's hit it again. These guys have given us some positive vibes. Why am I down in the doldrums? Come on, guy, get up, get it done. So yeah, just the support is what really keeps me going. Anyway, to see people get excited about what we're trying to do, despite the setbacks and things that have gone wrong in the past, it's still very inspirational to see people join and be like, oh my god, this thing. It's like, okay, calm down. You're putting a bit of pressure on here, but it's just just great. Thanks for all the support over all the years.
Fantastic. Well, unfortunately, we're out of time for today's live stream. Thank you very much, Piers. Thank you very much, Dan, for jumping on and answering all these questions. Of course, as Dan said, thank you to everyone in our community who tuned in, who's been following Radix, and hopefully will continue to be following Radix. All those who submitted questions, and sorry to those who we weren't able to get some of your questions covered today. We will try to in future ones and hold more of these AMAs as well. We hope to catch you all in all of our social channels over the next few days, and we're very excited to be opening up the Radix token sale tomorrow. That's October 8th at 1800 UTC, 6 p.m. UTC. Piers, any last words before I flick it to our beautiful ending screen?
No, apart from thank you very much for everyone's attention and time. Really appreciate you coming along, and hope to see you in the community again soon.
Thank you very much. Good night, everyone.